Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. The Tough Girl podcast is sponsorship and ad-free, and that's thanks to the monthly financial support of patrons. To find out more about supporting the mission of the Tough Girl podcast to increase the amount of female role models in the media, please do go check out Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. All female patrons, $5 and above, are invited to join the closed Facebook group, the Tough Girl Tribe. All patrons will also get their name on a dedicated patrons page on the Tough Girl website. Today, I'm so excited that we're going to be speaking with Helen Langridge, an endurance cyclist who dabbles in running and hiking. She cycled LEJOG solo and unsupported in 2015. In 2017, she cycled over 30,000 kilometers around the world. Please note, during this podcast episode, we do talk about mental health and depression, so please make sure that you are in a good space before you listen.
I am living in Edinburgh at the moment, but I am from Kent and a bit of a Londoner at heart. I started cycling about 2011 when I was just trying to get around by bike, and then I got hit by a police car in London, and it motivated me to start cycling on the weekends because I realised I really enjoyed it, and then it's just snowballed from there, from commuting to doing a lot more cycling.
Whoa. So you just threw in there that you got hit by a police car.
I did.
What, seriously? Not seriously? Were you able to walk away?
I had concussion for about 3 weeks. They were turning across me through traffic, and there was a taxi badly positioned, so I went across its bonnet, but I landed on my forehead basically, and it just gave me concussion for a few weeks. But I was fine. There's no long-term damage, but it shook me up, and I didn't want to stop cycling, so I was like, okay, I set myself a challenge. I'm going to do a sportive. I'm going to then start cycle on the weekends. I just really enjoyed it as well, and it kind of made me realize I didn't want to stop. Yeah. So
did it put you off commuting though, or was that quite nerve-wracking going back into commuting?
It was really nervous. I would get nervous at any junction, because it happened at quite a large junction on Regent Street. And so every time I would be approaching one, I'd be panicking, but I just forced myself to do it because I didn't want to stop to get back on that horse again. So
yeah. Let's just go back a few years. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like?
I grew up near Dover, so quite countryside-y, by the sea. It was quite a quiet childhood. I did a lot of horse riding, a bit of dance. I was not really like the outdoorsy type I am now. I wouldn't be interested in going for walks or anything. But then when I moved to London for university, I went to UCL, and I was really big into theatre. So doing like the tech side of theatre, being backstage in the dark, never really going outside whatsoever. Yeah, it was only really commuting and getting about by bike that kind of brought me outside again. So I had quite like a dark, it was either in the library, in lectures, or in the theatre. So I never really went outside at all in London.
So you started commuting, and you obviously loved it, and then you started to cycle on the trails and started to do sort of more sporties. What was it that you liked so much, and why did you decide to sort of carry on and take it to the next level?
I could see a difference in myself. So when I was commuting to work, I would arrive really awake and really ready to get going with whatever I was doing. And on the days that I didn't cycle, I noticed that I'd be really struggling to keep my eyes open. I just never really kind of woke up throughout the day. And mentally, I was starting to see a difference with just being happier. And I had sort of a lot of ups and downs with depression as I was growing up. And I could see a difference in me without really acknowledging it at first, that it was the cycling, and then I made that connection, and then I was seeing a difference in myself physically, and I started trying to sort of beat my own sort of times, a bit like Strava, when it was starting to come out. And yeah, it was I just started to really enjoy the effect on me in both physically and mentally. I could just see such a difference.
Yeah. Oh no, that's absolutely fantastic. And I believe that you signed up to do a race with the British Heart Foundation. Do you want to share more about that?
Yeah, it was a 3-day trip from London to Paris, and it was all signposted, and you were on your bike, all your stuff was transported each day. I think I finished, I did like a little 60-mile sportive soon after the crash, and I just loved it. I loved sort of just knowing where I was going and having people around you doing the same thing. It was like a really nice community feel that I'd never really experienced before, maybe since leaving uni and doing a lot of shows. So I just kind of wanted to get better and better. And the next thing was like, okay, well, what about if I do like a multi-day thing? And then I just Googled it, and the British Heart Foundation trip came up, and it seemed like the perfect stepping stone. So yeah, that was 3 days, London to Paris, and it was an amazing achievement. I remember sitting down at the end thinking like, I've just moved my body from the capital of one country to the capital of another, all by myself. And it was a sense of achievement I've never really had before. And then I remember going home and then being like, right, what's next? Well, I just do the length of the UK. It was, and looking back now, I'm like, wow, I realized that's not necessarily a usual mental jump from just London to Paris to Land's End, John O'Groats, but it just seemed like a natural thing to be doing.
Isn't it weird? I think it's a really natural thing to be doing.
I said that.
I was like, I can see the logic, and I think the great thing as well is I can also see the progression, because doing that, starting with the commuting, then signing up for a sportif, and then doing that multi-day ride from a capital city, from London to another capital city to Paris, you've grown and developed as a person throughout that experience. And then once you finished it, you do start thinking, right, what's next? So, Land's End to John O'Groats. So bit of a bigger distance, just bit of a different challenge as well, staying in the UK. How did you make that happen? Were you going to do that with a group? Were you going to do that solo? Were you going to plan the trip? Like, how were you going to make that work for you?
I wanted this to be a whole other step up. So I really enjoyed the fact that all the turns were signposted on the British Heart Foundation trip. But I thought, well, if I'm going to make this just something that I do, then I need to learn how to plan day to day. So I sat down, I had a year. I gave myself a year from coming back from Paris to then leaving in the September in 2015. And I was like, okay, if I hadn't really I hadn't come across bike packing by that point. So I was like, okay, I'll just stay in hotels and B&Bs, and I'll take just one change of clothes and a few bits and bobs, and I'll just book all my B&Bs and hotels each day, and I'll plan the whole thing, and I'll just have to do it. So that was it. I just had every single day planned out, and I managed to make it all. And some days were huge and some days were shorter. And I had one day off in the middle, staying with a friend. I took 2 weeks off work, and it was just like a holiday. And I was surrounded by people at that time who didn't do these things. So everyone at work was like, why are you doing that? You're taking 2 weeks off, but you're cycling every day. You're going to be exhausted. It's not really a holiday. Like I hadn't found my tribe yet. I hadn't found people who understood. So it was quite sort of tough to get to the start line. And at that point as well, my ex-boyfriend was quite, he would try and one up me all the time. So when I did London to Paris, he was like, oh, I'll just cycle the length of Scotland, for no reason beyond the fact that he wanted to show that he was better than me. It was a very strange relationship, and that didn't last. So that really ended. Like as soon as I was like, I want to do more, that was not a thing. So I think that helped push me to want to do my own thing for me, because it wasn't really about anybody else. I wanted to see the UK in a different way, and I wanted to step myself up, and I wanted to be quite self-sufficient. So that's how it started.
Yeah. I mean, that must have been actually really quite challenging, especially I think the difficult thing is when you don't necessarily have like a tribe or a community or people who get it. Sometimes you have, and you're planning an adventure or challenge, whether that's running or cycling. Sometimes you have all these like little questions and, or like little things which you feel as though you should know, but you don't necessarily know, like, what do I pack? What do I take? What's it going to be like day to day? How do I manage my food? If I'm camping, can I wild camp? Where do I camp? Like, where do I fly? And sometimes I think that can build feelings of like overwhelm, like trying to get all this figured out. I mean, with the planning and preparation, how did you plan and prepare? Were you reading blogs, listening to podcasts, watching vlogs? Did you have somebody that you could talk to and ask for advice and information?
No, I think I did a little bit of Googling about sort of where other people were going, but my route actually turned out to be not perfect at all. I went along quite a lot of canal paths that really weren't made for bikes. That would quite frustrate me. I was on perhaps roads that were maybe a bit too major for me at the time, and so it wasn't perfect, but I was quite adaptable. So if the road was too busy, I would try and find a parallel road that was quieter. Or if I was feeling really tired, I had quite a lot of knee problems at the time, I would go a different route to be not so hilly. And so even then, even though I had sort of a final destination, I was still learning to be quite flexible. But no, I didn't really have anyone around me that had either done it before or had it as sort of something that they felt they could do. Like I like my best friend Meg has been amazing throughout the whole of this. Like she's been a constant and she's always been really supportive of everything. But it's hard when no one else around you has done similar things, so you can't just sit there and go rant at each other and they go, oh, I know, because it's hard for them to associate. So no, at the time it was quite tough.
And how was it for you doing this experience solo? I mean, what did you learn from that journey?
I learned that people will just strike up conversations with you when you look like you're doing something interesting or unique. So quite a lot of people would just ask me what I was doing, because I wasn't just out with just me and my bike. I had a bag on the back, so I wasn't just sort of like pootling around for the day. People could kind of see I was doing a longer thing, so people would just chat to me. I remember one time I stopped in a lay-by where they had like a little cafe out of a van, and the guy just gave me water. I didn't ask for it. He was just like, here you go. I was like, oh, people were so kind. So I really started to appreciate the value of kindness that people will voluntarily give without being expected of them, which is really quite humbling, actually.
Yeah, I have to say, kindness of strangers, it still melts my heart every time. What was the biggest challenge for you on that trip? Was it the technical side of things, like getting punctures? Was it the logistics? Was it riding solo? What was the challenges that you had to overcome?
I hadn't gone through something as mentally challenging as that before. So whilst my 3-day London to Paris, I had other people around me. My parents were actually some part of the support team. So I was being completely solo. It was like a double-edged sword. It was amazing to be doing it on my own and seeing these amazing places, but I didn't have anyone to share those memories with. I didn't have anyone to support me if I was crying in a lay-by from knee pain, which happened. All these things. It was a big lesson in self-sufficiency, which was one side amazing and the other side really hard when you were really down. But I got through it, and that's the big celebration, really.
Was it difficult after you finished, cycling LEJOG and then going back to work, and then that sort of that period afterwards?
Yes, but not for post-adventure blues, because that really was the start of the breakdown of my relationship, and I had just moved to Scotland as well. So it was about 2 months before I left for LEJOG that I moved to Glasgow with work. And I didn't know anybody. I found it really hard to make friends, and I don't think there was sort of Tough Girl Tribe or Adventure Queens. I didn't think they were as big at that point, or I didn't know about them at the very least. So I didn't really know how to make friends, and I was really descending into this completely desperate pit of depression. So I went off and did LEJOG on my own, and came back home to no one, with no one around me. And it just descended into a really dark place. And it was a really bad time. And I think that was September that I did LEJOG. And at Christmas, I ended the relationship and I went to see my GP, and they put me on antidepressants and sleeping pills because I was just not functioning. And they actually sent me home to Kent for Christmas. They gave me they call it a line in Scotland to be off work, and just said that's not what I needed to do. I needed to be around people, and that really helped. And I had about a month off work after that. And the antidepressants just leveled me out. They just buoyed me up so that I could go to counselling and I could talk through what was going on. And it didn't take me too long to pull myself out of that pit, because I've been in it before, and not that I've ever been on the antidepressants before, but they were so necessary. I couldn't get out of bed for about a week, and I didn't shower for a long time, and it was really bad. but in the January, things seemed to kind of take a big U-turn, and for the better, which was when I went on Tinder.
I was going to say, that's not where I expected that story to go. Going on Tinder. Please continue. Tell us more. What happened on Tinder? I'm excited.
I met Mike, and this is the hilarious story he likes to tell. We'd been talking for about a week, and I was on a date with an American guy, which wasn't going particularly well, but we'd been out to dinner and blah, blah, blah. We were finishing life fairly early, and I looked at my phone, and I had a message from Mike saying, oh, before I go and see my sister and go away tomorrow, do you want to have a drink? And I was like, yep, I'll be 15 minutes. And I left the first date and went on a second date with Mike, and that was it. my Tinder career was thwarted on my first day. But yeah, so that was when Mike and I met, and his profile said that he really wanted to cycle around the world. And I'd harbored this desire for a while, but it always seemed way too out there to really be achievable. But when I saw that on his profile, I was like, yes, that's him. At least the type of guy I'm looking for. So thankfully we matched, and my first message to him was, when are we leaving? And he replied saying, how about Tuesday? And I said, okay, I'll bring the chamois cream. And he said, I'll bring the sweets. So we started chatting, and it was always a bit jokey. So our first date was like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing? How would you plan it? When would you leave? Where would you go? And then the second date was a bit more like, logistically, is it really possible? And then it turned into this commitment to each other that we were going to go off and do this cycle around the world together. And it just snowballed from there. Everything seems to just snowball with me.
Oh my God, like I'm literally so excited.
Thing is, you know what happens. So
I
know. So everything happened so quickly. So we moved in together. So we met at the end of January, and we moved in together in the June because my tenancy was ending, his tenancy was ending, and it just made sense to be able to save money to live together. And we had a flatmate. And then I was working in the evening as well as in the day. Mike took a job as a waiter around Christmas and did really well with tips. So that saved a huge chunk. And yeah, we just saved. And we built the bikes from scratch, like bought the frame, bought all the components. And he did so well with learning how the bikes went together. So at any point on the road when things went wrong, he just understood the bikes. So it was fixable. And yeah, 14 months. No. Yeah.
Wait, don't tell all the story yet. I just want to, because I need a bit of suspense. So, sorry, just going back to the Tinder date. Was it, do you know what, I really want to know. Was it a case of meeting and just knowing, or was it more like you were going to go, like, to be friends and do this challenge? There was that compatibility, or was it not love, but, I don't want to say lust, maybe less love, like when did you know that actually, wow, you know, was it literally the second date? Like you met and spent like 3 or 4 hours together, and then bam, that was it?
I think we knew even just from, I had a really good feeling just from chatting even before we met. And then when we did meet, it was like, wow, this feels like too good to be true. Like, considering the awfulness of the couple of months before, how bad that was. And I think we were just both very honest with each other. I remember asking at one point, tell me something that you wouldn't tell anybody else, or something that I wouldn't know about you just from chatting. And turned out Mike had been off work for a few months as well with depression as well. And it was that connection of understanding what it's like. And it was just this fundamental connection that I don't think I'd really had before, with that amount of honesty with each other. And then, yeah, as the dates progressed and it just clicked, it just felt really right. So it's almost fairy tale, really.
It is. It gives me hope. God, some of the Tinder dates that I've been on, holy moly. It's never turned out that the second date we're going slightly around the world together. But
you never know.
You never know. I'm really interested in like the transition from it being a joke to it suddenly being like turning it from a dream into a goal. So putting that date on, and deciding, okay, how much time do we need to plan and prepare? Where are we going to do? When did you sort of like finalize that? And then when did you tell your friends and family, hey?
It stopped being a joke maybe around sort of the third or fourth date, when Mike had been away to see his dad and spoken about it with him, and his dad was like, this is the best thing I've ever heard, you should definitely do it. And I think having that support from a family member made it a bit more feasible. And then we were just like, well, I think we need to do this. I think you can't have this goal that we've both wanted and secretly harbored for years. We've come across someone who we'd be able to do it with, because for me that solved the problem of when on LEJOG I was like, oh, I have no one to share these memories with. I found this wonderful man who was willing to go around the world with me on a bike. It was just too good an opportunity to pass up. And at the points that we were at, Mike was about to qualify as a solicitor. I had enough of my current job, so I was looking to either change job or do something drastically different. Everything just seemed too good to be true and too perfect to not just jump in and just take a chance. Because really, how much worse could it get than me not being able to get out of bed and shower, to a little while later feeling like I could literally take on the world? It was just too good to be true. I had to do it.
Absolutely. So I want to just get a bit practical, because the big thing which many people will be, obviously you've mentioned about, transition, changing your job, and Mike's qualifying as solicitor, but I'd love to talk about the money. How much did you budget? Like, did you have savings? How were you going to pay for it? Did you know, was this going to be a 1-year trip, a 2-year trip, a 3-year trip? Was it more flexible than that? What was some of like the practical logistics of either the time frame and the money?
So yeah, it's quite overwhelming when you start to really think about these logistics. So we start off by saying, okay, well, neither of us has any savings, so we're starting from scratch. So we knew we were going to be away for at least a year plus, because we weren't going to do it super quick. It wasn't about speed. It was about enjoying it and seeing the places we wanted to see. So, okay, well, we don't really want to have everything in storage, so we'll sell everything we own. Fine. That was number one. Number two, we need to get extra jobs. So that's what we did. Number three, could we get any sponsorship? Well, we wanted it to kind of link in with a bit of the mental health stuff that we'd both been going through. And it was about how cycling is really good for us. So we managed to get a really small amount, but very significant for us, some sponsorship, which we're so grateful for, because that also meant people started to believe in us as well, which helped mentally. And then we sat down at one point and we're like, the world is open to us, bar war zones, really, and certain places you can't really go. So where do we really want to go? And we started writing things down and just drawing a line on a map and joining up all the dots. And we were like, okay, there are some blogs out there that say how much people were kind of spending per day. So we took a bit of a guesstimate from that, looked at kind of currency rates, and we kind of came to a number that we thought would last us over a year. And then we were like, can we save that? And we just started saving every single penny. We wouldn't go out. We wouldn't sort of go out to the cinema. We weren't going on holiday. We were just really living like we had no money to spend, which we didn't. And we managed to save, including a little bit from our family and the little bit of sponsorship we got. We saved about 26,000. Out of that came the cost of the bikes, the cost of the kit we needed to buy, the flights, the visas, the vaccinations, which were expensive, and all the other little bits and bobs, the ferries we needed to buy in Europe. And it lasted us, well, we just lived like we still had no money when we were on the trip. What we had guesstimated from other people's blogs and looking at currency rates, we ended up chopping out New Zealand because the Brexit vote sadly affected our spending power. So the pound dropped to enough of a point where we just couldn't really stretch our money to that. Yeah, it lasted 17 months. That gave a lot away. Sorry. We lasted 17 months and we ran out of money. So I think we did pretty well for two people for that long. I
think you did incredibly well. And I just really want to say thank you so much for sharing that, because People need to know. Although I feel a bit sorry for New Zealand. Like, it's a bit brutal. No, chopping out New Zealand.
Chop it out.
But actually, unfortunately, there's has to be compromise. Like when there has to be this balance. There has to be this compromise. And also, I'm just thinking, actually, selling all your stuff, being really minimalist, and actually, you don't necessarily need to go out, because I can imagine it just being quite like time consuming, with the maps, with the planning, with the trying to figure out travel and visas and vaccinations, and also not necessarily just the route, but what are the things that we want to see, like where are the places we want to go, what are the that type of logistics of it. So that just became your focus for so long. You had a year to do this planning and preparation. What was it like up in the run up to setting off?
Oh, it was really hard. So I really struggled sometimes with going to work from 8 till 4, coming home, doing a bit of active exercise, which we weren't really fit when we left, but I tried. I did a bit active exercise and then sit down and transcribe audio words, like letters that were transcribed by doctors, etc. That was my evening job. And it really wore me down because it never felt like the leaving date was going to get closer. And there were points when Mike was like, hey, this 3 hours that you're doing in the evening, that's going to pay for 3 days in the outback or whatever. It was, we had to really try and make it a realistic transition between you're earning this now, but it's going to pay for so much on the trip. And it's going to really be worth it. But it doesn't make it actually any easier in the moment when you're slogging away so many hours a day and not seeing anything for it, because it's not like you're earning a paycheck and just going off and spending it and have a great time while you're living it. It was for a later payoff. So it was tough. And getting to the start line was probably the hardest thing. And it took a lot of commitment, because the whole year of doing that is tough. It's not just like a couple of months, but we did it. And I don't think I would have been able to do it on my own. So having that drive from Mike as well really helped.
So one of the things I was interested in, you talked about this connection that you had with Mike from the get-go, and then obviously you moved in pretty quickly, and then you're working together towards this amazing goal of cycling around the world. And I think during the process, there's obviously going to be a lot of compromise. Mm-hmm. And I've heard this before, because I know couples who've been together for like 5 or 6 years, and then they go traveling together and it all falls apart because because they're either they're not either used to living together or spending that much time with another person, having to rely solely on that, either not never losing sight of them, but being with them 24/7. If you're sleeping in the same tent, the same room, there's no escaping that other person. Was that something that you were concerned about or worried about before the trip?
No, we had this connection that was just rock solid from the start, but other people were really worried. Family and friends were just a bit like, you could see it in their eyes when you tell them, and they'd be like, okay. It's like they didn't think we understood what that meant. But no, we never had any issues. We didn't really have any arguments. Maybe I had the occasional meltdown when I was really hungry and really tired, but we just learnt how to be with each other, and we understood. It was a big learning curve in, so he's saying this. Does he really mean it? His body language is saying something else. He looks really tired, etc., etc., etc. But it wasn't, I think we'd both been through relationships in the past where there were these big hurdles that communication wasn't good enough, etc., etc. So we were both at a point where it just worked. But that's not to say it was easy. We had to communicate. We had to be sure that we fully understood each other. Sometimes making judgment calls when the other one didn't agree, but it was the right thing. And there was so many examples of things happening that, whilst I said we didn't argue, there was occasional niggles, but it was only ever through the pressure of stress or tiredness, really. Or feeling like there was pressure of something, we should be going further today, we should be getting to this place. All the things that are kind of external pressures for your worry about what other people will think of you, that was quite tough in general, especially when our route changed, which it did.
So tell us more about the route. 30,000 kilometres, 30 countries. Yeah, you started from Glasgow. Just sort of describe the route and the journey.
So we left Glasgow and went to Newcastle to get the ferry, because we just wanted to get out of the UK and just get abroad, because it really felt like it had started. So we got the ferry to Amsterdam, and we went north through Germany, Denmark, Sweden to Finland. And from Helsinki, we just went due south through Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, popping into Romania, down to Serbia, Bulgaria, and Turkey. And then we went all the way across Turkey to Georgia, and it was in Turkey in the east that it actually got quite high in the mountains, which I hadn't expected. And I had a heart arrhythmia that kind of kicked back in, which was really annoying. When I got sort of to quite a low to mid altitude, we really weren't that high, and it was really unexpected, but it made me feel extremely unwell with like severe palpitations. But at least we could descend from that mountain really quickly, and I felt so much better as soon as we started descending. So we were like, well, we'd planned to go through Central Asia through the Pamir Highway, and that gets even higher, and it's on a plateau. And the only way to get off the plateau is to go even higher to then descend. So that was the first big struggle with trying to figure out ourselves whether changing the route so severely was okay for us, or as individuals as well, because that was Mike's real big goal, was to cycle the Pamir Highway. We prepared for it, we had all the books, we had all the maps, and also whether people would think less of us and our journey if we missed out such a huge part. And it was quite a difficult thing to come to the conclusion that it didn't matter what other people thought. It was our trip, it was risking my health. And also at the time we had a year's worth of antidepressants, and I had a lot of contraceptive pills. And the border at Uzbekistan is renowned for things being taken off you like that. And we couldn't just go cold turkey without those things. So that was probably the first big hurdle to get over. But we had to compromise because we didn't really have the money to be going so slowly for me to acclimatize. So we were like, okay, well, let's just do that another time. Let's leave that part of the world for another trip. And we're in Tbilisi in Georgia. Where can we get to that is east from here? And the cheapest flight was to go to Beijing via Kazakhstan. We had like a 19-hour layover in Kazakhstan. So we just did that. And we flew to Beijing. We had already had an amazing Chinese visa. And we just spent 2.5 months in China, just having the most wonderful time that we wouldn't have had if we had done the original plan. So whilst we learned about compromise and being flexible, it didn't always mean that the result was going to be worse. So that was a big lesson.
Big lesson. And also, I think when you can come to the realization that other people's opinions of you don't matter, like it's very liberating when you're just like, actually, I'm doing this for me, and I'm happy in myself with my choices. And actually other people's judgments, like, no, like push them away. Like they don't matter. So 2.5 months in China, incredible. How is your Mandarin?
I can get by. I could get by with enough. There was one point when Mike fainted in a bike shop in the south because he was so tired, and I managed to just ask for water and tell everyone just to let him sit on the floor. It's quite impressive when you're immersed in a culture and language how much you learn. But we just absolutely fell in love with China. It was the best 2.5 months, I think, of the trip.
Where did you go to next?
We did Southeast Asia, the coast of Vietnam, and we stopped in Hoi An to get our wedding clothes made.
Ooh.
Yeah. We thought, well, why not? It's renowned for its tailors, so best place for it. So we stopped there for a few days, and
okay, hold on. So when did the engagement happen?
We got engaged before we left.
Oh,
so
okay.
We wanted to kind of just enjoy it with family and friends while we were still at home, but we didn't know when we were going to get married. We know where we wanted to get married, but we didn't know when we were going to get there. So
keep going. So you got your wedding clothes. What did you go for?
What did I go for?
Yeah, like a big old white fluffy dress. I was thinking you've got to carry this for quite a while. So are we going?
It was just a really simple dress, nothing too bulky, because I had to pack it. Mike just got a really, really nice suit made, a woolen suit made. And yeah, they were so lovely. It was quite tricky not having any other female influence there for me. Like, I didn't have my mum or my friends, so I kind of had to make a lot of judgment calls on my own. But so actually, I had Mike and his dad who flew over. He saw it all getting made. No, it was a really interesting and just really different way of doing it, and also just really affordable and really well made. Yeah, I don't regret it at all. So we packed them down, and we did carry them in our bags until Cambodia, where we met Mike's best friend who had flown over on holiday, and she took them back with her because she was then going to fly out to meet us for the actual wedding. So it all just worked out really well. We didn't have to carry them too long.
Oh, that's perfect. I mean, so you're in Cambodia. Carry on describing the rest of the route.
Cambodia, we were there for really not long because it's such a small country, but it was also one of my favorites. People there were so kind. And then we did Thailand, Malaysia to Singapore, turned around again and cycled back to Kuala Lumpur because that's where we were going to fly to Australia. But we actually were there for Christmas, and I have a friend who's Malaysian and his family live on Penang, so we were there for Christmas for like a week. It was amazing. So yeah, we flew to Perth, Australia on New Year's Eve. Really cheap flight.
You were actually documenting your trip as well. So sort of Ever East, you had a blog and a website. How was documenting your journey while you were out on the road?
It took a lot of effort. I didn't have as much energy at the end of the day as I had maybe hoped. So sometimes, I mean, when it was up, you could see the ebb and flow of my energy levels and how I felt during the trip, because when I was feeling good and high energy, I'd post loads. And then when I was extremely tired or things were tough, I wouldn't really post. So we were videoing everything, but I was typing up a blog when I could. I was really aiming for kind of every couple of days, whilst I was also making notes of people names and places names, which has really helped, because that's the kind of thing you forget, names and places. So I really had to make such a concerted effort to get it done, but it's invaluable now.
So you're in Perth, cycling across to Sydney?
We cycled to Brisbane. So we did the southwest coast of Western Australia, which is so underrated. It's the most beautiful part of the whole of Australia, in my opinion. I met some amazing people, but there was one occasion when I went missing from Mike, and that was a big drama, and we lost most of my stuff. Well, some of my stuff. I had a knee problem again, which was kind of exacerbated whenever I stopped for too long, because everything would really tense up and pull my kneecap out of place. And at one point in Western Australia, I had to hitchhike to get to a physio, but the guy who offered us a lift could only take me. So we're only about 20k from the town. So Mike was like, okay, I'll cycle. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you at the first turn off from the highway into the town. I was like, fine. So I got in this car with this strange Australian man. He was a little bit odd, but he was fine. I thought he was perfectly harmless, which he was. But my bike was put in the back of the ute, so just out in the open. Drove into the town. He dropped me off. Waved goodbye. Perfectly fine. Opened my bar bag, and it was empty. Like, all my stuff had gone, except my passport. And I was like, did Mike take the stuff out before, like, just in case? Or has this just fallen out on the highway? And I then couldn't get hold of Mike because he was cycling. And then I waited a while, and I was like, he should have been here by now. Where is he? And I was just starting to really panic. Long story short, my bar bag had been open out the back of this truck going at 100 kilometers an hour, and all my stuff had just like scattered across the highway. And Mike had cycled along and started to find all of my stuff just broken on the road. And he was panicking, thinking that I'd been kidnapped and murdered.
Oh.
So he was just like cycling so fast he was nearly sick. And then he couldn't find me when he got into town because I'd been dropped off at the second entrance to the town, whereas he was at the first. Managed to find each other, all good, but we managed, and we got a lift back to where I got picked up, and we walked back along the highway again to find all my stuff, but we couldn't find our credit card. So that was the only thing that went missing. Big palaver. Ended up, we were just left with cash until we got to Melbourne. So we were really, really quite tight across the whole of Australia. But yeah, we managed it. We did it. But we were also in Australia in the summer going against the wind, which was the most hellish experience I have ever done. Ever. I cried every day, like screaming into the wind, sobbing because of how challenging that was.
And you talked about your knee as well. What was the problem there?
Yeah, everything just tensed up, and I think learning since I got back, my glutes were also quite weak.
Oh, join the club.
So it just pulled everything out of line, and it just we visited a physio, and she was like, I know I can't tell you to rest because that's not what you're going to do, so here's how to strap it and here's how to massage out certain muscles. And we just managed it until the end, and it was fine, and it's doing well now. So it was a minor inconvenience that ended in quite a lot of drama.
Yeah. Tell us about the wedding. So you planned to get married in a certain place. You got engaged before you went. Wait, I love this story. You met on Tinder, decided to cycle the world, got engaged before you went traveling, got your wedding clothes in Vietnam, took them to Cambodia, they got flown home to the UK. But you had a destination in mind of where you wanted to get married. Tell us more about that.
So we wanted to get married in Yosemite National Park in California because Mike had cycled the length of the West Coast before, but he'd cycled to San Francisco and finished in Yosemite, and it's a really special place for him. And also, the profile picture on Tinder was him on top of Half Dome in Yosemite, so it was kind of like a full circle, really. And it's just the most stunning place in the world. It's like a painting everywhere you look. It just had to happen, so that's where we were going to get married. It's really easy to get a visa, a wedding permit. So you have a permit for the park, and then you have one for the county, and that's it. And if you have fewer than 11 people in your wedding party, you can get married anywhere as long as you're not trampling things. If you have more than 11 people, then you have to get married in a car park with a view. So I didn't want to get married in a car park, so we managed to keep the wedding party down to just the essentials, really. So we got married in Cook's Meadow at about 7 a.m. with the most amazing light and company and the best wedding photographer in the world. And it was everything was perfect. But we only really knew the date of when we were going to get married once we booked our flight from Brisbane to San Diego. So we booked that on our last day in China. So we gave enough notice to people, I think. And that must have been about 8 months difference.
Oh, what did you do for your honeymoon? I know you carried on cycling, but...
Yeah, that was it. We just cycled across the States. We treated ourselves to one night in a really nice hotel. It was like lodges in the Sierra Nevada. And they upgraded us when they found out what we were doing and what the occasion was. But that was it. But then, 2 weeks later, it all kind of had a big catastrophe. So that wasn't the best honeymoon. Whilst Australia was really mentally tough, it was just the wind and the heat that we were battling against. But in Utah, just going into Wyoming, Mike nearly died. So that was not the most welcome post-wedding joy that I'd expected.
Do you want to share what happened? Is it? No,
it's good. It did result in me having to get counselling. Now we're back home, and that's all fine. I'm good. So we'd left Salt Lake City, and we're climbing up into the Rockies on the I-80, and we were heading towards Evanston, and we were like, it's not that far, but that's all there is between where we were and Evanston. So it was really open whilst going quite high into the mountains, and it was a really good temperature. It was about 15 degrees, a bit overcast, and we were like, it's really quite pleasant, but it is the highway, so there's a lot of wind going past you and a lot of noise. And then this storm rolled in really quickly, and it was ice rain. It just dropped the temperature to about 4 degrees in about 10 to 15 minutes. And we'd stopped underneath an overpass and just kind of collected ourselves, and we're like, are you okay? Yes. Are you okay? Yes. Okay. We're both a bit wet, but if we keep moving, we'll keep warm because there's no shelter beyond being underneath this bridge. And Evanston was only about 14 miles away. It wasn't that far. So I went ahead and Mike was behind me, just so we were at the same kind of pace in case there was a puncture. And the rain was really loud and the trucks were going past really loud. And, American highways are like slabs of concrete. So there was that sound all the time. And over the noise of that, I heard this scream, like a yell. And I turned around and Mike has closed his eyes and he was screaming, crying. And I don't know how he hadn't cycled into the path of trucks or collapsed on the side. He was trying to still move. So I just went into like emergency action mode, and I'm very good in a crisis. So I just left my bike to fall to the side and caught him. And he was starting to curl up into a ball whilst on his bike. So I couldn't move him off the bike because he couldn't really stand. He couldn't communicate to me because he wasn't shivering because he was past that point. His body was screaming because it's panicking whilst also going into hypothermia. So I was just like instantly, okay, I need help because I can't get the tent up in time because he'll go into a coma and he'll just be soaked. So the only way I can get him into safety is to get him in a car. So I started waving my arm, and thankfully someone stopped in about 30 seconds. It was so quick. And he reversed back down the hard shoulder to us, and he was like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "He's having a panic attack." I didn't want to say hypothermia because I didn't know if I was exaggerating, if I was over worrying, but I couldn't get him off the bike and he couldn't communicate. So this guy, thankfully, was quite a big man, so he managed to like scoop Mike off the bike and get him in the back of his car. And we just piled him with blankets and duvets and blah blah blah. And in the meantime, we had called 911. Thankfully, we had really good health insurance, so it would have been fine. And it took about half an hour for the ambulance to arrive, by which time Mike had started shivering again, and he could just about communicate. So they took him into the ambulance and warmed him up really slowly, so you can go into shock if it's too quick. And he was in the ambulance for about an hour and a bit. And this is just the kindness of strangers to the absolute extreme. So the guy who had stopped, called Jason, said, where are you going? How are you going to get there now? And I said, well, we're going to Evanston. I could cycle, but Mike's bike, I can't ride with it. So he was like, okay, don't worry about it. So in the meantime, when we were in the ambulance, he called his girlfriend who brought her truck and a McDonald's for us both. And one of the paramedics and Jason and his girlfriend unpacked our bikes and put them in the back of the truck. And once Mike was released from the ambulance, because they were quite happy that he was fine again, they just took us up to a Super 8 in Evanston and made sure we were fine and just said goodbye, and off they went. And they didn't want any thanks for it, but they just saved Mike's life. And it was an extremely traumatic experience for me. Mike doesn't really remember much about what happened, but he's fine. He was fine after a few hours. But yeah, I really struggled with the aftermath of that.
Yeah. Did you want to end the trip then?
Yeah, it was a really tough decision to make. We didn't rush the decision. We were stuck in Evanston for about 4 days because I tried cycling, continued to cycle into Wyoming on the I-80, but there's nothing. It's wide open plains with no shelter. There's no trees. If a storm rolls in, it could happen again. And also I was really struggling with the trucks going past again because that was like giving me flashbacks. And we didn't want to quit because we knew that whilst it felt like an easy decision to take, I'd regret it. I knew I'd regret it. So we looked through all the options of, what if we hire a car and then Mike could just try and race to Canada and I'll be his support driver? Or what if we get on a train from Salt Lake City and go to Denver? What if we just abandon it and go to Canada where we've got friends we were going to stay with? Like, so many options were there, but we decided we had to make the minimal amount of compromise that we were going to be happy with, because otherwise we would just regret it. And part of this again came down to worrying about what other people were going to think of it, which was now it feels like the most crazy thing to be considering, because it was such a traumatic experience to have gone through. But at the same time, you can describe what had happened to people and they'll be like, oh yeah, but everyone was fine. Like, but he could have not been. And we just got married and done this huge thing together, and that could have been the end of it in a second. What if he'd cycled into traffic and been hit by a truck? Like, that would have been it. And all this, it was a really, really, really tough time. It was the hardest part of it all. And it was a shame that it was so much towards the end, because it really tainted everything. Until I'm a lot better with it. I've gone through counselling, thankfully I had that option coming back home. But yeah, so the compromise was we got a lift down to Salt Lake City, hired a car, collected our bikes again, and drove to Denver and started cycling again. So we got out of the mountains basically, which was a shame because they're the most amazing mountains, but it wasn't worth the risk of it happening again.
You've got to do what is right for you and Mike. At the end of the day, you know yourselves best. You've been on this trip, you've been on this experience. When did you start to think, I'm ready to get home? Did you ever start to think that, or did you want to extend the trip? Or was it like, were you getting to the point where you're like, actually, I want a cup of tea in my bed?
It was a tricky one because I loved the freedom of the trip, but there was always this constant worry of let's not spend too much money, or we can't go visit that tourist attraction because it's quite a lot of money. Or so I think when we got back to Europe, it was so much like home compared to all the other parts of the world. It was a comfort, but I didn't ever feel like I wanted to go home, but I did feel like I wanted to stop cycling for a bit. So if we hadn't made commitments to be at home by a certain point, we'd organised our wedding reception and we were due to be at a couple of other friends' weddings. I think if we didn't have all of those commitments, we would have just stopped, say, in Canada or Australia and got a visa, worked for a bit, had a proper stop and rest, and then continued again. So whether that would have been realistic, I don't know. We missed earning money. Yeah, I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I really, really miss it. We both really miss being on the road, but we're still young, so you never know what the future's going to hold.
What was the transition like, sort of going back to, I don't want to say normal life, but, you know, a more normal structure, you know, moving back into a house, not traveling every day, not visiting new places, just having a routine again? Like how was that transition?
It was really hard. So when we got on the ferry from France back to Dover, we both had a little cry. But then even when we got home, initially it was like, yay, we're home, but no one understands what it's like. So at least we had each other, but going into, you know, having bills to pay, having to go to work, this sounds so ridiculous, but it was really hard having those commitments. The structure was really good for us, but the lack of opportunity to just only worry about food and sleep, it was quite overwhelming sometimes. But we had a good support network around us. So I think it actually initially it was a bit of a novelty to be living in a house again. Having a door to shut was quite novel. And I don't think it's necessarily got any easier, but we've got different focuses now, and we'll always miss being on the road. But at least that's good motivation to maybe one day, say when we're retired, if we ever get to retire, that would be sort of a goal to do again. But there's also so many bits we missed out. So there's always trips to be planning.
Absolutely. So you got home on August 2018, and I believe you're currently writing a book about the journey.
Yeah, it's taken a bit of a stall because of the next big thing, but it's in the background. It's going to be written, definitely. It will be out at some point.
Fabulous. But let's talk about the next big thing. Do you want to share what your next big challenge is going to be?
Oh my God, no, because this makes it so real.
It makes it very real because you're announcing it to the world on the Tough Girl podcast. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
On the 31st of May, I will be leaving to break the record to be the fastest woman to cycle around the world. Breathe. Oh my God, that's the aim.
That's the aim. That's the goal, to become the fastest woman to cycle around the world, to break Jenny Graham's record of 110 days, is it?
That's my aim. She's 124.
She's 124. That's your aim, 110 days.
Whew, my heart's racing. Yeah, that is the goal, and we're getting there. So that has taken over, and this isn't like I came home and decided to do it. It's been the goal since before we even left on the first trip. So it's been in the background. It's been part of the purpose of the first round the world, just kind of learning how to live on the road. And yeah, so it's counting down very quickly.
How are you feeling about everything?
Quite bipolar about it. It's obviously been such a long-term goal that I'm both really excited to be back on the road again. I mean, fair enough, it's in a different format. It's a lot more about performance and time. But seeing the world by bike is an experience that is unparalleled, I think. To really have that connection with the world around you, like to meet people and find that human kindness that you don't experience day to day is something that I cannot wait to have again. But also, it's such a huge goal that it's a lot of pressure. And this is the first time with this challenge that I felt like it's something that I really believe I can do. I don't have a doubt about my ability to do it, which is quite a novel thing for me to actually have belief in myself. But there's so many what ifs that some of which are outside of my control. It's sometimes I get a bit overwhelmed and my anxiety is like through the roof. But then I have to think, well, the only thing that is within my control is my own performance, and that's what I've just got to focus on.
Are you going to be doing the same route that Jenny took?
Yeah. Same route, which is also the same, pretty much the same as what Mark Beaumont did. It's become a bit of a standard, just so that you're really beating the same record each time. It seems like the fairest way of doing it, and it's the best route. It's the best one.
Yeah. And how are you feeling about, getting on the road again over in America with the trucks and dealing with that?
Pretty good. I think that's the advantage I have, is that in some cases I've literally ridden the same road before. But in most cases, I've been to the country in general, so I kind of understand how it works. The biggest thing I'm worried about is Russia. They're not so used to bikes over there, whereas most other countries I'm going through are kind of used to it, particularly China. So yeah, Russia is the big concern. So I've had to just kind of sit myself down and go, okay, what is going to make myself feel better about Russia? I'll learn Russian. Okay, then at least I know I can read signs. I can know what people are saying. I can communicate with people. So just to add on top of everything else, I'm trying to learn some Russian.
So what are your days like at the moment in terms of the planning and the logistic and the fundraising? I mean, how much money will it take to do this challenge?
I've got a aim of about 25,000. because it's less time, but I've got a big contingency amount in that. I've got a bike sponsor, so I've got a bike that's almost ready. I'm in talks with a company about sponsorship. My training is going really well, and I just spend most of my time training or looking at the route, like obsessively, and making sure I'm just waiting for the next paycheck to get I need a new passport, and then I can really get underway with all the visas I need. And it's coming together, but some of it's about waiting, and some of it's about relying on others to believe in you, which is the hard bit again.
But you believe in yourself, and that is the most important thing.
Yeah, that's a good feeling, and I hope that comes across as well.
So tell me more about your training. Are you working with a coach? Are you working with a psychologist, like a sports psychologist or a adventure psychologist, to mentally prepare as well for the challenge?
I'm working with Dr. Leslie Ingram, who was at Edinburgh Napier, who was she was Mark Beaumont's coach for his Around the World. So she's got me under a pretty strict routine, which is where it's going really well. I'm just tired a lot of the time, but in a good way of tired. But I'm not working with a psychologist at the moment, but I think it should be something I look into once I've got some sponsorship secured, because it's that kind of what if I fail is a big part of it. And it's quite overwhelming sometimes, a lot of the worries. So I think it's certainly something I should be looking into.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't even know. Oh, I mean, it's such a big challenge, but it's such an exciting challenge as well. Yeah. I sort of, what do I want to know? I want to know everything. But how can people support you?
Just positivity around me. I think that's the aim, just to have that support network. Even if I don't know the people who are telling me all these kind words, I just need positivity. On the road, I really hope to be sharing as much as I can on Instagram through stories and posts, but having previously been through something that's not even at the same level, I know how tiring it can be. So I'm not like promising there'll be 50 stories a day, but that I'll be otherwise filming it for at least documentary once it's done. So I'm filming part of the lead up, all of this stuff that shows how hard it is and what the commitment is. Because obviously it's not me and Mike, so it's just me doing this now, and we're still trying to live daily life or around it all, and it's mentally it's really, really tough. So I just need support and positivity and my tribe around me.
100%. So where is the best place for people to find out more information about, obviously, LEJOG and your first world cycle with Mike, and then your next big challenge, which is cycling around the world to become the fastest woman, leaving on the 31st of May? Where should people go?
It's helenlangridge.com is my website. And my Instagram is helen.langridge. So it's all quite similar. So that's everything. But everything should be there in either of those two places.
Oh, Helen, this has been incredible speaking with you. Like learning so much about your journey into cycling, and then the progression from London to Paris to LEJOG to the World Cycle to going after this world record is amazing. And I'm so excited that you shared with us your journey on the Tough Girl podcast, and I just cannot wait to track you and follow, and just to see you go after this challenge. It's so inspiring. But before we go, Helen, I'd love for you to leave final words of wisdom, final words of advice for other women out there who may be thinking, I want to do an adventure, I want to do a challenge. It may not be cycling around the world, but it may be like getting on their bike or just doing something that excites them and scares them. What advice would you like to leave our listeners with?
Set a date and tell people, and then you got to do it. And just because something feels like it's way beyond you, it might be beyond yesterday's you, but today's you has decided to do it. So it's what you're going to do.
Perfect way to end the podcast. Helen, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah.
Hey Tribe, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Helen. What an absolute legend and what a challenge. Now, if you're interested in learning more about the fastest woman to cycle around the world, or the current record holder, then please do go take a listen to Jenny Graham. So Jenny Graham came on the Tough Girl podcast on the 26th of November 2019, where she shared more about her 18,000 mile over 4 continents through 16 countries, solo, unsupported cycle ride, which she completed in 124 days. So I absolutely love what Helen is doing. It's absolutely incredible and so inspiring. If you are interested in cycling, there's a couple of other podcast episodes I'd recommend to you as well. Go and take a listen to Jasmine Muller, who came on the Tough Girl podcast on the 24th of December, and she shared more about ultra cycling, breaking records, dealing with failure and saddle sores. If you are thinking about cycling but in a different way, take a listen to Rachel Yassim, who's a 49-year-old mother and full-time adventurer. She's currently cycling the world and living a very nomadic lifestyle on her terms. I've also shared more about my cycling challenge for cycling from Vancouver in Canada all the way down to Cabo San Lucas in Mexico. So there's actually 2 podcast episodes that you can listen to. The first one is about the planning and preparation for the Pacific Coast Highway and Baja California. And then the second episode is when I go into more depth and answer the questions and talk about the ride and the different challenges available. Now, what is really interesting as well is that we have also spoken with the first woman to cycle around the world, Juliana Bering, who has a phenomenal story and backstory and an incredible way of viewing the world. So I definitely encourage you to take a listen to that episode. That episode came out in, I can't remember the year. Yes, I can. Juliana Bering, we spoke with Juliana in 2016, and she became the fastest woman to cycle around the world. So she broke the record originally. After that, we've also chatted with Emily Chappell as well, who's a bicycle courier who's taken on the world, and she has been the female winner of the Transcontinental 2016 race. I'd also suggest you take a listen to Rochelle Olsen as well. She's an Aussie, 30-something. She's plus size and cycled nearly 5,000 kilometers from Canada to Mexico. She's hiked Everest Base Camp and trekked the Inca Trail. So there are so many episodes of women that I've spoken to who've done incredible cycling challenges. So if you're wanting to know more about our previous guests, then I would encourage you to go and take a look at toughgirlchallenges.com, which is the central hub. It's the Tough Girl website. On the website, you can find out more information about all of our previous guests. If you go onto the Tough Girl blog, you can find all the show notes for anything that we've discussed, books which have been recommended, etc. And there'll be links through there. On the website as well, there's more information about myself, some of the different challenges that I've done, from through hiking the Appalachian Trail in 100 days in 2017, cycling the Pacific Coast Highway in 2018, walking the Camino Portuguese in 2019, and hiking the Lycian Way in 2019. So there's lots of information, and obviously I'm very, very active on social media. If you want to find out what life is like for me behind the scenes, come and follow along, especially on Instagram stories. I'm very, very active, and that's at Tough Girl Challenges. So please do go check out toughgirlchallenges.com. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any episodes that come out. New episodes come out on a Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time, with Tough Girl extra episodes coming out on a Thursday at 7 a.m. UK time. A massive thank you to all of the patrons. If you're a patron right now, give yourself a pat on the back, and I hope you're smiling, because you are helping to change lives. You are helping to inspire women all over the world to overcome great challenges, to take on new adventures, to travel and explore, and it is because of you. So a massive thank you from the bottom of my heart. You are making change happen. You are part of the process, and I am so, so grateful to each and every single one of you. Have an incredible day wherever you are, whatever you are doing. Give it 110%. Go for it. Make sure that you believe in yourself, because that is so, so important. Just believe in yourself. Give it a go. See what happens when you believe in yourself. See what you can achieve when you believe in yourself. Lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.